everybody. Cheers. Happy Wednesday and welcome to Trades Lady Happy Hour. So for those of you who are new here, Trades Lady Happy Hour is a weekly series on Instagram Live where each week I meet with a amazing woman in the trades, all sorts of areas of the trades, mostly automotive focused, but kind of some adjacent trades as well, to hear their stories, to hear about their journey, what they're up to, what their advice to other young tradeswomen out there is, and just to shine a light on them. Really, women make up a very, very small percentage of women in the trades, and so this happy hour is about celebrating them and shining a light on all of the wonderful things that they're doing to give them a little bit of love. I do have to put in a quick thank you, huge thank you to our sponsor that has been helping make this possible and will be helping to grow this beyond just Instagram Live. So thank you to Drive Time for their support of women in the trades. Drive Time, if you're not familiar, is a large automotive refinisher and sales. They do used car sales, but they also employ a ton of folks in the mechanical and restoration side of things, restoring vehicles to sell them to the everyday folk at affordable prices, selling solid vehicles to folks out there who need good transportation, which is especially difficult in this day and age when the used car market is absolutely insane. So I'm very grateful for them for supporting this, but also for their commitment to kind of raising up new technicians and new folks in the trades, both male and female, to help us kind of close the gap a little bit on the trades deficit. So big thank you to Drive Time. But without further ado, I want to introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Riley Mall, and she's had kind of an interesting journey to getting into restoration work and automotive work. She does some metal fabrication, she does paint and body. She's got some interesting stories and experiences already in just a short amount of time. She's an up and coming young woman in the trades, so I'm very excited to meet her. I've not met her in real life yet, so this is going to be fun. I'm going to see if she is here yet.
There we go.
There you are. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I see purple in your hair.
Yes, it's mostly purple. The roots are growing out.
Yeah, I know how that goes. It grows fast, doesn't it? Side note, I just want to point out how tired I am, I guess, because you had the screen kind of cutting you off, and I adjusted my phone like it was going to make a difference.
No, I'm just trying to set up because my phone's half dying, so I have to have it on the charger.
Oh no. Well, cheers. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did.
Yes. Awesome. I get it wrong so often. So.
Mine's relatively simple. Occasionally people get confused with the last name because the H throws them off.
How do they pronounce it? I've
heard Male, Mahal. It's
male. All right, yeah, that's a good one.
It's small. That's just how we pronounce it.
I feel like that's kind of appropriate. That's how people mispronounce, because you have kind of a gender neutral name too.
My parents did that on purpose, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my mom and my dad, when they were having, when my mom was pregnant with me, she was well, I don't want to give her a super girly name in case she goes into, an industry that isn't geared towards women.
I love the forethought. How cool is that?
And so they were well, this one's kind of gender neutral. And then they also were well, let's go with the male spelling just to make sure. Because at the time, there was only really, two. Because there was Riley and Reilly, which were the two popular spellings of Riley.
Yeah.
And so she was oh, well, let's just go with the more male spellings. That way she seems like a dude on paper. And it has played in my benefit a little bit.
I absolutely love this. I need to meet Mom. What a cool. So is she in a non-traditional job?
No, she's an HR director.
Interesting. But this was something on the forefront of their mind while they were pregnant with you.
Yeah.
That's so incredible.
I think it's because my dad was also very non-stereotypical. My dad was a stay-at-home dad.
Nice.
So I was raised in a garage. So I think they were thinking a little bit like, well, he's going to be staying home with her. She might end up a little bit more on the, masculine side.
Okay, so they were like half psychic and half just being realistic and knowing that you were going to grow up in the shop.
Yeah.
I freaking love it. What a fantastic name history story. That's awesome. All right, so now that we've like already gone down a rabbit hole, tell the fine folks at home what you do.
So I work in a private car collection. I'm very blessed to work in a private car collection because I am very new at the industry. So I'm still learning a lot every day. And I'm very thankful to my boss, who is very patient with me. Through all of the mess ups that I have, he's the most patient person I've ever worked with. But working in a private car collection, it's wonderful. I do kind of all types of body work, from painting to some fabrication stuff to typical like filler work. It really just depends on what car's in the shop and what step we're at right now. Like this week, my boss is actually on vacation, so he trusted me alone.
Ooh.
And,
Is it just you and your boss?
Yeah, right now. We're trying to find somebody else to help out, because he also helps manage all of the cars in the collection, so he's pretty busy. So we're trying to find a third to help out, but he's got to find the right person and the right fit. But so like this week I was sandblasting today, doing some filler work to a Bronco cap, and I was in the paint booth on Monday spraying primer to
Nice.
Bronco. Yeah,
Nice.
so it's like everything.
Yeah, I love it. And I see you doing metal work on your Instagram feed and all sorts
Not
of fun
as
stuff.
I would like to right now, but that's because everything we have right now is in the body filler and like primer stages, so it's just a lot of sanding.
That's yeah, it takes up a lot of time, doesn't it? I always love when we get like newbies and hobbyists into the shop and they see us like doing the body work and they participate in the body work, and then it just keeps going and going and going, and they'll like go away for a few weeks and then come back and be like, you guys are still doing body work. Yeah.
Why they feel good though.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. All right, I want to. What's that?
I said it's all the hours you put into it.
It is. Well, and it's one of those things too where like if you do it right, nobody really knows that you put that much time into it because it looks so good, right? Like, it's only when you do it poorly that people notice.
Exactly.
So I want to dig into what you're doing currently, but I want to go back in time a little bit. We got the very beginning, stay-at-home dad, worked in the garage. You grew up in that environment, and now you're in a private car collection doing like the most amazing things. So fill me in on the in between. How'd you get here?
So kind of how I got here was when I was in high school is kind of where it started. I was adamant on not going to a traditional four-year college. So I didn't want to sit behind a desk all day.
Okay.
I couldn't sit there all day. I was like, you know what? I don't want to be in an office. I don't want to be, doing, I guess, more traditional women's work in a way to put it. Because since I was 12-ish, I've been working on horse farms.
Oh.
So like I've always wanted to kind of just work with my hands and do physical labor. And so when I told my parents that, my dad was like, well, you're going to tech school then. So I went to my high school tech school, and I went for machining for 2 years. I got a couple of my certifications in machining, and I applied to the college I went to actually for a machining degree after graduation. So I ended up going to college anyway.
All right, wait, I want to pause you before you go any further. Tell me about machining shop in class in high school, because that's kind of amazing that you even had a machining shop in high school.
So the area that I live in like Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, which is like on the border of Jersey, in between New York and Philly. Okay. And it's a very industrial area. I mean, the epicenter of warehouses, it feels like. There's new ones popping up every day. But we have about, just in the Lehigh Valley, there's 3 tech schools that cater to high school students. My dad, after, I didn't need somebody keeping an eye on me after school, went back to work, and he was working at our local tech school. And he was like, machining program might be good for you. I was like, well, yeah, I don't want to be in the automotive shops because that's where you are. But he was like, well, you got to do something. So I'm like, all right, I'll do something. So I went into the machining program. It was not easy for me to get into it because I was a junior when typically students would go in as a sophomore. Oh. And on top of that, I was a straight A honors student. And so I had to have my dad help me fight the school a lot with getting me into the program, because they were like, oh, well, you're a straight A honors student. You should be going to like liberal arts schools and, getting a traditional 4-year degree. And I'm like, no, I want to work with my hands.
Yes. Oh my God. I want to talk about that for a hot second because I had the same experience. It was like this idea that if you're smart, you shouldn't go do the trades. And I'm like, why?
Because you need to have a brain to do a trade.
Right.
Like you need to have, math skills and reading comprehension skills. And especially in, when I went to college for restoration, I needed to know history and how to memorize history.
I was never good at that part of it.
Yeah, it depends on the day for me.
So how did you combat that with the guidance counselors and with the instructors? How did you and Dad convince them to let you do it?
My dad used to be on the school board, so he just kind of called them and was like, well, you're going to let my daughter go because I said she's going to go, and this is what she wants to do, and you're not going to keep her from going. And so then I ended up being able to go, and I was like, sweet. Thanks, Dad.
Pays to know people sometimes.
It does.
Was their main objection because you were a straight A honor roll student, or because you were a girl, or a combination of both?
I think it was a combination of both. I don't really remember, but like I was the only girl in my machining class. I think at the time when I started, there was 2 or 3 girls out of 3 automotive classes and 2 or 3 girls in the welding class.
Oh, wow.
So like there really wasn't that many girls, and that's that's an entire wing of the tech school. There was 6 girls, 7 girls in that entire wing. So I think that was kind of part of it.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, this whole straight A honors thing, because in my freshman year I took chemistry, which was like a junior year class, and wicked smart, but I was like, no, I don't want to go to college. Like,
I love it. Good for you. Good for you for knowing then like what you wanted, and for being able to stand up to that on both fronts, because I think it really is kind of 2 different sets of stereotypes, right? It's like the gender stereotype, and then there's this conception about if you're smart, you need to go to a 4-year college. I gotta ask, in the class, once you got in with the guys that you were in school with, were there any issues around like either of those things, like both gender and that you were a good student, right?
So the machining class itself was the goody 2-shoe class of that whole wing. Okay. With machining, like that was like the smartest of the kids that were in that wing of the tech school. Okay. We had to have high math skills in order to be in machining. It's a lot of trigonometry, it's a lot of angles, it's a lot of math to figure out, okay, and it's simple math. It's, division and addition and multiplication, but it's knowing how to apply what you learned in your homeschool and then putting it into the real world application of doing it. Which was always funny once I got back to math classes at my homeschool, when students would be like, when are we going to use this? And I'm like, I use this every day.
Right. You're like, I'm going to use it this afternoon. I don't know about you.
Yeah. But yeah, on the women's side, yeah, there was some pushback. There was a couple guys that I do remember were like, ooh, girl, like, we just want to like try and date you. And I'm like, no, we're not doing this. I'm here to learn. I'm here to be, part of the shop and do what you guys are doing. Like, just let me alone. Um, which is something I just kind of always faced because I liked to play like soccer growing up, but not on the all-girls team, on like the spring co-ed teams and stuff. So like I always kind of just dealt with it.
So this was nothing new for you.
No, no.
How do you handle it? I think, a lot of times it's the first time for young girls going into mechanic school or restoration school. It may be their first time experiencing that pushback of I want to date you or you don't belong here. How did you handle that and nip that in the bud?
Depending on the kind of stage in life that I was at, when I was in high school, I didn't handle it that well. I got pretty emotional over it. I I went over to my dad over in his shop and was like, Dad, can you talk to the principal for me? Because I didn't want to. But then, like, as I got older, I learned to deal with it myself. I dealt with the similar issues when I was in college, and I went to my program director and talked to him about it, and he was the most supportive person about it. He was like, you're immediately going to go talk to the dean. You're going to tell the dean everything you just told me, and then he'll, have go through the process with you from there. So it's just kind of like knowing when you can handle it yourself by just saying to them, hey, cut it out. Like, I'm being serious. This is not something that you should be doing right now. This is not something that I want. This is not something that I'm, trying to portray to you, like that I would like to date you, because I don't. And like where that line is of, okay, I can't handle this myself anymore. Now it's time to bring in somebody who is either like a manager or, HR or teacher if you're in the classroom. I also in high school had a great shop teacher.
Nice.
He really looked out for like the girls and everything. So like when he noticed it, he would look at them and give them like that dad look of like, cut it out, and then tell them to cut it out. And he still does that to this day, because I talk to my dad all the time and he tells me like, yeah, he still stands up for all the girls and everything. And
I love it.
Yeah.
It's a conversation I've been having with a lot of folks recently, kind of this idea of how to be a good ally. And one of the big reasons why I like doing these happy hours is to bring awareness to like how many women are rocking it in the trades, but also the challenges that we experience, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize the challenges that we face. And so I kind of want to highlight some of those, but I also want to highlight what the ally looks like and how people can be better allies. I'm sure you had both guys in the class who were supportive and those who were not. Would you mind sharing some examples of some of the challenges that you experienced and like how folks were able to support you, or how you wished folks had supported you more?
So the one that jumps right into my mind, when I was in college, there was this kid in my class. None of us really liked him. He acted like a know-it-all and didn't know it all. He needed to be knocked down a few pegs. But I remember we had a sub in our class the one day because our teacher had to go out because like a flood happened at his parents' house or something. It was a crazy year with weather. And he says to me, he goes, "You just don't belong here." And I'm like, okay. And I whipped around and might have sassed him. I don't remember what I said. But I remember what he had said to me about not belonging there was in response to a gentleman I was talking to about possibly doing an apprenticeship in Italy with another private car collection. And he was like, well, you're never going to get that because you don't know anything and women shouldn't do this. And I remember whipping around and spitting a bunch of facts to him about all the women who were behind Henry Ford and all the other inventions and everything in automotive history that we were learning about at the time. And he's like kind of looked at me like flabbergasted. And then our substitute, who was awesome, I wish I could still talk to this guy. I mean, he moved to Tennessee, so he's no longer in the area.
Mm.
But he looked at him and goes, "Oh, I'm not helping you with this one." And looked at me and goes, "If you need anything, let me know." So then that was my breaking point, and I had gone to the program director, and I was like, "Hey, like, I've tried with him. I've tried to make him understand that, like, I deserve to be here just as everybody else does." And I told him, I'm like, "This teacher, he saw it happen," and he goes, "Okay, we'll tell that to the dean." And like, it was right before summer break, actually. And I even was cordial with him after this whole incident because he was doing an internship in my hometown over summer. So I said to him, I was like, "Hey, if you ever need anything, just let me know. Like, I live down the street, basically." Like, I was being the nicest
Being the bigger person.
Oh, yeah. And then when we had gotten back to school the next school year, this teacher had said to the teacher who was there that day had said to me, he goes, "I just wanted to let you know, like, I told the dean what happened and everybody what happened. Like, I'm completely behind you." And I'm like, "Well, thank you so much. Like, you are my best friend for this right now." But yeah, I mean, just kind of letting, like, if you see that a girl has, like, it under control in, like, how she's responding to him without looking like she's about to hit him, because there have been times I've almost hit a guy over saying something stupid. Or, she seems to have the situation under control. Just kind of hang back and see if she might need help. But if, he's starting to get the best of her, you just get his attention and be like, "Dude, she's got every right to be here as you do. She's probably doing better than you are." Because that was the case. I actually ended up coming out top of my class. So
Of course you did. Of course you did.
That's true. I was either like the top or like the second to top student in that class, but I know he wasn't above me, so.
That's fantastic. Well, and I love that you pointed out the idea of, like, if it looks like they've got it. Because
Yeah.
I feel like, I saw something on social media once, some TikTok thing where there was like a woman referee, and she had this situation under control, and some dude came in and stepped in between, and everybody was like, "Oh, that's what a real man looks like." I'm like, "No, she had it. She
I know
had
what
that."
you're talking about, yeah. Where she pulls the red card out and she's like, "No, get out of my face." And then the other ref's like right in between. I'm like, no, that's not how you do things.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I think, and I'm sorry for going down this rabbit hole, but I think sometimes the idea of what an ally looks like, sometimes it gets like misconceived, like, "Oh, I've got to defend them for them, or I have to, protect them or do things for them or point out that they're a woman and guys, you should be nice to her." Like, I feel like sometimes that isolates us even more, and like, just let us be a person.
Yeah.
And then
Just
if we need your help, step in and like have our back. But
basically.
yeah, I love it. All right. So, okay, moving on a little bit. Well, actually, first of all, not moving on. Machining work. Did you enjoy it? Is that something that you kind of took to, or?
I did, but I found it very simple after a while because there was just not much that could really challenge me, especially because I went in at like a year late. So there were some skills that I missed out on, like single point threading. I never got to do, which I wish I could have, and that probably would have been my biggest challenge my senior year. But like,
Okay, I'm
my
not a
senior
machinist. What did you say? Single point
threading.
What is that?
Basically you have like a cutting tool that's at like a 60-degree angle or whatever angle that your threads need to be cut at.
Okay.
And you're setting up your machine to cut the threads,
Oh.
but you have to physically have the timing down so that you don't screw up the threads.
So you're
Yeah.
putting threads into something that isn't threaded.
Yeah, without using like a traditional tapper die.
Okay, I was like, so there's an actual tool for that? I just use a tap.
Yeah. It's the old way of doing it before they had the taps.
That makes sense. I'm like, I just spent like 15 minutes doing that the other day, like trying to put threads on something that didn't have it. And I'm like, this is stupid. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah, it's,
That's
putting it in a way than doing it the old-fashioned way.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
But like, I was learning how to do like CNC machining, which is the computer numerical controlled stuff.
Yeah.
And one of our objectives was to write out the code by hand.
Oh, wow.
And I think it only took me like a month to write out a flawless code that ran really well. And I think I only had like 2 or 3 mistakes. And one of
Wow.
them was I didn't set the machine up right and ran the tool into the part. But that was just a rookie mistake.
Amazing. So you were naturally good at it, but
Yeah.
you thought you'd be bored, basically.
Yeah. It also kind of runs in the family. Both my grandfather and my great uncle were machinists.
Oh,
I know my grandfather worked at one of the largest steel companies in the country,
oh, wow.
Bethlehem Steel. I don't know if you've ever heard of it because you're from the West Coast, but it's one of the biggest steel producers of the early 20th century
Okay.
in the United States. There were also steel producers out in Pittsburgh, but like that was the biggest for Eastern PA.
Okay.
So yeah, so it kind of ran in my blood. My
Yeah.
great uncle was super proud about it. He was like, he would tell anybody and everybody his great grandniece was a machinist, and it was great.
I
Yeah,
love it. That's fantastic. So the family, needless to say, was supportive.
very, yeah.
So you get out of high school, and what was next for you? Like, what was the next step?
So the next step was I was going to college in the fall after I had graduated. And before I even set foot on campus, I actually had changed my major, from machining to paramedic.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second.
It always throws people for a loop. I started volunteering as a firefighter when I was 17.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
You're not precocious at all.
I needed adrenaline in my life, so I ran with a volunteer fire department and a volunteer water rescue department
Oh, wow.
for about a year and a half. I got
As a
certified
17-year-old.
as a 17-year-old, yeah.
Damn, girl. Okay.
I wasn't allowed to do much at that age, but I did turn 18 before the end of high school, so I was able to start doing some more. And I did get certified as Fire 1, which allowed me to go into burning buildings if there ever was the chance.
Did you ever get to?
Not in a real life situation, only in training.
Bummer.
Most fire calls are accidents or medical calls nowadays. They're not really fires, so
Fair
I
enough.
guess it's a good thing.
Probably.
But little dumb thing I wanted to do but then didn't do, thankfully, was I was gonna go into the military. About a month, actually it was a month to the day after my 18th birthday, my best friend passed away. And I was very grief stricken, and I was just trying to find a way to run away from it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to join the military. I'm going to go away from this area. I don't want to deal with it. Thankfully, woke up 2 months later and was able to get out of the contract. But I had signed up to be a paramedic in the military. So I was like, you know what? Well, if I was going to do that for there, I might as well do that at college.
Okay.
So I switched to the paramedic program in the college. I loved it. I love doing trauma stuff. The medical stuff I could not do. And I actually ended up failing out.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I completely tanked my GPA. I was at like pandemic gas prices GPA. So, but it was like the end of the semester. I had already signed a lease for an off-campus apartment with my boyfriend, and my parents were like, well, we're not going to pay for this if you're not in college.
I mean,
So
that's
like,
fair.
it is fair. It's fair enough. So they're like, well, you got to find another program or another degree or switch to the other college in that town. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'll figure something out because I don't want to be on the hook for this money. I had a job, but I was like, I don't want to pay it. So I was looking through all the programs that my college offered, which was Pennsylvania College of Technology. And I'm going through the lists. I'm like, all right, well, medical's clearly out, which was like half of the majors there.
Interesting.
Yeah. And my boyfriend and I are looking through the list, and he's like crossing them out as I'm saying no. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing forestry. No, I really don't want to do horticulture. I don't want to work on the big engines. I don't want to work on new cars. And then, well, there's a restoration program. And I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I called my parents. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And they're like, okay, go ahead.
All right.
Give it a shot for a year. If you don't like it, I was going to take a gap year and figure something else out from there. But I ended up starting classes, and within the first like 2 months, I was in love with it. So
I love it. What was the initial, like, what made you fall in love with it?
I would say probably during my refinishing class that I got to take in like my first semester. I was working on a 44 dash, and it was full of pits and everything. And I was like, well, how is this going to look nice? And it was after we had started to do some filler work and learning how to use sanding blocks and stuff. And so I spent probably about 3 weeks worth of class, which was probably about a work week, like a good 40 hours, filling every little pit on the front with filler and sanding it flat and sanding it smooth. And one of the guys that I was in class with spent the same 3 weeks trying to color match this thing because all the colors were super faded, and we were trying to find the best possible matches we could using either PPG or Axalta, because our college had both mixing banks, which was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. Only for waterborne though, so we didn't have any solvent bases. So we had to, make sure it was a waterborne formula and everything.
Yeah.
Ended up having to tweak one of the formulas, which was interesting, trying to figure out how to tweak a color formula and make it match perfectly. Yeah. That's an extra like 6 hours of tweaking spray outs, tweaking more spray outs, and figuring out where to go. But then by the time that it was done and it was in its final base clear, we had an open house later, that year towards, I think it was either the first or the second semester of my first year, but it was like towards the end of one of those semesters. And everybody was looking at it like, this is really good. And like my refinishing teacher, who was super finicky about like the way something looked before it was finished, and like, before we even took it into the spray booth, he, was taking his nail and like dragging it across every little pinhole going, is it going to catch? Is it going to catch? And he's like, this is really good. And I'm like, oh, hey, maybe I can do this.
Nice.
So, yeah, I ended up kind of just falling into it.
I love it. How long of a program was it?
We only offered a 2-year program.
Okay.
Currently, the college offers a certificate in restoration. They downgraded it. But if you ask to get an associate's degree, I understand that you can still get the associate's degree. You just have to know to ask for it.
Interesting.
It was a relatively small program. Okay. We graduated maybe about 12 to 14 students a year, I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's tiny.
Yeah.
So how did you wind up, I believe you had said somewhere in an article I read about you that you had started with this car collection as an intern while you're still in school. Is that correct?
Yes. So one of the things we had to do as part of the program was we had to do an internship in between the first and second year.
Okay.
And my current boss had reached out to the college saying, hey, looking to possibly have an intern. Do you have anybody? And my teacher knew that I was from the Lehigh Valley area, and he was like, this is kind of perfect for you. It's kind of central, so it doesn't matter, if you're living at your house or your boyfriend's house, because my boyfriend lived 40 minutes from me on the other side of the valley.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, cool. So I went down over spring break, and I was like, hey, will you hire me? I have absolutely no experience except for what they taught me in school. And he's like, yeah, sure. That was basically kind of how it went. He was like, okay, yeah, I'll give it a shot. It was his first time having an intern at all. He's been doing it as a hobby his whole life. He's done it professionally for, I think, around a decade, maybe even longer.
Okay.
He's had a couple different careers. if I'm remembering correctly, he was a career welder. Um, he worked for Napa for a period of time, and he had his own restoration, well, more so hot rod, but a restoration shop as
Okay.
well. Um, so he was like, you know what? Yeah, like I'll take a chance on you. We'll see how this goes. And so I worked with him for the whole summer.
Nice.
He was the one who taught me how to fabricate because that wasn't something we did until our second year.
Okay.
Um, he taught me how to TIG weld,
Nice.
much better than the school taught me how to TIG weld because they taught us on 1/4 inch plates. He taught me on actual sheet metal,
Oh, nice.
just much harder.
It is. Well, it's a totally different, like, depending on what job you're doing, like, you need different things.
Yeah.
But for automotive, yeah, it's a totally different world.
Oh yeah. And they had typical welding teachers teaching us, in our welding classes. So when they were teaching us MIG and TIG, I think the thinnest it got was maybe 1/8 of an inch. So when I got switched over to 16 gauge, it was a little tricky. There was a lot of blow throughs, and I learned how to fill holes very easily in TIG. I still have to practice how to do that.
I'm right there with you. I'm like 50% of the time, I'm like, I'll like hit a couple and I'm like, yeah, I'm actually getting the hang of it. And then I'll blow a huge hole in it. I'm like, okay, now I get to learn how to fill that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's a fun skill to learn because you also, as an automotive, body tech fabricator, unless you're fabricating panels full time, you're not going to be TIGging every day or every week. So, I mean, he did it for years, so he's amazing at it. But, for the typical fabricator, you're not going to be doing it every day or every
Right.
week. You might be doing it, once, twice, 3 times a month, maybe.
Yeah.
So, the skills are there, but sometimes they slip through.
Fair enough. That's very gracious of you. We got to be gentle with ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So you get done with the internship and it stuck. He wanted to keep you. You wanted to stay.
So when I was going to graduate, I wasn't looking at staying in the area.
Okay.
I was looking at either moving out to the West Coast or doing the apprenticeship over in Italy. But then, COVID happened. So Italy was out of the picture completely. And I had an offer out in Washington. Yeah, Washington State.
Okay.
On a very tiny peninsula in the very tippy top corner. And I realized I couldn't afford it to move out there. And, with shops, they don't make a lot of money, so there's no relocation assistance or anything. So I was like, well, I can't really afford this. I also really love my boyfriend and I don't want to leave him right now. So I was like, well, I'll just stay in the valley for, a year or two, figure out what's going on. That way too, there was some security of I have my parents to fall back on or something in case something goes wrong. There's people here I can fall back on instead of being completely on my own out on the other side of the country.
Very logical.
Yes. And when I had made my decision, I had wanted to go back and work for him at the private collection, but he had just hired somebody to be a full-time detailer.
Yeah.
So he wasn't really able to bring somebody in at that time. So I was like, hey, that's fine. And one of the beneficiaries or board members or whatever of the college program had a shop in the Lehigh Valley. And he had tried to hire me a few months prior. So I gave him a call and I hung my head in shame and I was like, yeah, I'd like to stay in the valley. Would you like to hire me? And so he did. And I worked there for about 8-ish months.
Okay.
Wasn't the right fit for a shop for me.
Okay.
They're a restoration shop. They've done some beautiful concours cars, but they also want things a lot faster than I could produce.
Okay.
So it just, my skill level wasn't where they were expecting it to be at, nor were my expectations met of, having somebody not so much to guide me, but to also just, hey, this is kind of how you do this. Try it this way. Or, maybe try using a different product there. And the person who was supposed to be like that was not the most helpful. So I think it was like April of last year. Yeah, April of last year, I had gotten a text from my boss from the internship, and he was like, "Hey, do you know anybody looking for a job?" And I was like, "Me, please."
Pick me, pick me.
Yeah. And thankfully he did. And
Nice.
unfortunately, I was fired the same week I was gonna quit anyway, so I was kind of like, oh, I get unemployment for until I start at the new job.
There
So
you go.
it was kind of a good timing thing. I actually got fired before I knew about having the job. So I went over to the collection the day after I got fired in the middle of the workday and was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And he's like, "What happened?" So I was like, "You know what? I wanted to explain to you this in person." So I explained the whole thing to him in person. He's like, "Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, I was gonna call you later today and say you got the job back." So I was like,
Nice,
"Sweet."
nice. I gotta ask, did they let you go because of skills or lack thereof?
Yes and no. I mean, I was also butting heads with the boss too. You know, a little stubborn. It's not my greatest quality. I try and work on it. But it was more so the skills. It's just I wasn't performing at where they thought I should be, which was a little hurtful because, he was on the board of the college program I went through. And
Right.
when I was hired and going through the interview process, I was completely honest and said, "Hey, I never did this before I went through the program. I have no experience except for what the program gave me and my internship. Here's some pictures of what I did in the program." And that kind of stuff, but like it was never, I don't think they understood how much of an infant I was at the time, basically, with skills. Because I like to say I was a baby, and I'm starting to get like the adolescent age now with skills. I'm trusted to be
That's a
alone.
good. It's a good comparison. It is. I find it so frustrating. And props to your current boss who was willing to kind of take you on, knowing that you didn't know anything. But I feel like there's this, oh well, you went to tech school, so therefore you must be good right away, and
Yeah.
a lack of understanding and patience. It's like you graduate from medical school, you don't start doing brain surgery right off the bat. Like it takes time.
It does. And, when you're in school, they can only teach you the basics of everything. I was lucky enough, I was able to work independently on a project for Amelia Island
I
in
was going to
2020.
ask about that next. Great segue. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I was lucky enough that I had some help from a couple of the guys in the shop. But some of them tech school, some of them were kind of immature. So because it was a Duesenberg, my teacher was like, "Yeah, I'm only putting the students I trust on this one." So there's very few of us working on it.
Nice.
So I did have that kind of experience in like the pressure of like, okay, this has to be for a show, like this needs to be done. I pulled late nights. I was working just about full time at a job outside of school as well.
Wow.
So yeah, I lived, ate, and slept in the shop basically for like 2 months. um, but yeah, so like I did have some like kind of more real world shop experience with that kind of pressure.
Yeah.
But I wasn't doing a whole car and I wasn't doing a huge section. I was just doing two fenders. Which
But
I bolted in.
still, like,
Yeah, it
holy crap for you while you're in school to be, first of all, working on a Duesenberg.
I have the emblem tattooed,
I love
which
it.
might be sacrilege to the older generation of lovers, but that was my first tattoo after college because I was like, yeah, I got to work on one of these. I want one of these. I'll never own one because they're so expensive, so I'll just get the emblem tattooed.
I love it. And then you got to bring a car to Amelia Island, which is like goals for so many people in
Yeah,
the industry, especially, restoration and like traditional restorations, not custom work.
yeah.
Like, that's that's insane. In college, you got to do this.
So we are very blessed at Penn College because I don't know if you've ever heard of the museum, but the Swaggart Museum in Huntington, PA, Mrs. Swaggart, she is wonderful. She loans us half of the cars in the shop are hers.
Oh wow.
She has a huge, extensive collection because her husband's father, so her father-in-law,
Okay.
started the museum in 1911.
Oh geez.
when they were just used cars. It was like 1911 or 1921, something like that. Like really early in automotive history, he started this museum and just started kind of collecting essentially a used car lot at the time.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of interesting cars. She owns the Tucker Tin Goose, like the original prototype. Wow. Yeah, she has that. Wow. The Studebaker Electric that rode underneath the Congress building, the building in DC, she has one of them. The Studebaker Museum has the other. Amazing. Her collection is amazing.
That's incredible. And you got to like basically have this as a partnership with your school.
Yeah. So every year her cars would be invited to Amelia, and she would have the car come up to the college. If it wasn't running, the students got it running for her. For an example, the class that graduated a year before I did, there was a 1909 International High Wheeler. Nice. That was a custom cab. It was originally like a truck, and then whoever had owned it, I don't remember his name, but whoever owned it turned it into like a carriage, basically. Nice. And it hadn't run in like, I want to say like 80 years or 90 years.
Wow.
And they had gotten it running. And I was there the day they got it running. Like the entire restoration program, both years, the first and second years, were there that day when they cranked it over for the first time and it was running. And it was really cool to see.
Yeah.
And they drove that onto the show field at Amelia.
That's amazing.
The class before them did the Tucker Tin Goose. And they took that to Amelia and Pebble Beach.
Wow.
Yeah, so and it's all sponsored by the college, great people who are donating to the restoration program to be able to afford to have, the money to send random 20-year-olds basically to these huge prestigious car shows.
That must have been so incredible. What a phenomenal program, first of all. Yeah. Like, that is so incredible. That's like stuff that people can only dream of. And then to go at such a young age and have been a part of a vehicle that was there. I've never been to Amelia Island or Pebble Beach, let alone been a part of a build that went there. That's like, hats off to you, girl.
Yeah, I only worked on the Duesenberg and got to go with the Duesenberg. But the Historical Vehicle Association, they highlighted the Tucker my freshman year, basically, in the program. And so I was able to go with them to their conference that they do every year, held in town. So I was able to kind of travel a little bit with the Tucker. I did get to hop through the window of it because it was in the trailer and I was the skinniest person. I also happened to be in a dress at the moment. My dad's very jealous of that one. But yeah, we do get a lot of cool opportunities through that program. And especially like myself, because I was the car club president for our classic car club on campus.
Okay.
So I got a little bit more perks than other people.
Because you worked for them, just like, to be clear, you worked for it.
Yes, I did. I worked my butt off for it. But yeah, so when I was in my last year at school, it was, right before COVID hit, was Amelia Island 2020. Literally 4 days before the country shut down. Because we were at Amelia on Sunday. We had gotten there, I think it was like Friday night. We spent Saturday at like Cars and Coffee that they do and the Concours de Lemons and like the auctions. And then Sunday was the show. And then we packed up right after the show, got the car loaded, and drove back to Pennsylvania. Got back to Pennsylvania Monday. I enjoyed 2 days and then COVID happened and the whole country shut down.
Oh my goodness. Well, at least you got to go and it was after and not before, because that would have been horrible.
I know. I would have probably bawled my eyes out if it was like, if Amelia was a week later, I would have cried.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Absolutely.
I was in the college lab for probably about 2 weeks until 10 o'clock at night during the week. almost every day that week if I didn't have class till late that night.
Yeah.
Because I had 2 days of class from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then I had another 2 days of class, which was like 10 to like 4.
Oh, wow.
And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I worked from 8 to 9-ish with like a 2-hour break as a server. So I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it.
Yeah, you did. What an incredible experience, though. And that kind of like hard work, I mean, you go through that early on in your career and like everything else is easy, right?
Yeah.
That kind of intensity. So did your shop that you're at now, the private collection, did that like slow down during COVID, or were you able to keep going with that?
So I don't know how they were with the beginning of COVID because I wasn't there. I was still up at college.
Okay.
'Cause I also just gotten my cat, and my parents didn't necessarily want her at the house. She ended up living there for a year, but um, but I had stayed up on the in my apartment off campus because we were the only trade school in Pennsylvania, at least, trying to reopen during that spring semester. Because 90% of what we do is so hands-on.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of need to be in the lab.
Yeah.
I learned the history of the rocker panel really well in those last 2 months.
Okay.
That's about the only thing I remember from those last 2 months, but I remember writing a 1-page paper on it.
Wow. All right.
But yeah, after I had graduated, I went to work for the restoration shop, and that was maybe about a month after graduation.
Okay.
I went to work for them. But in between there, my current boss, who works at the private collection, he was working on his personal truck, and I needed to finish my lab credits. So we were told to reach out to local people and say, hey, can we work on your stuff? Or like if we had a project car, go, hey, we're just going to do this on my project car, and I'll send you pictures. So he was nice enough to let me work at his home shop and finish up my lab credits so I could graduate on time and everything. And yeah, from then I went right into the workforce, and it's been interesting.
What kind of fun projects do you have going on in the shop right now?
We are working on a 66 Bronco and a 59 Corvette. I don't know anything about the mechanical side because I'm like mechanically illiterate, as I like to say.
Okay. You can't know everything.
Yeah. I do know both of them have been updated drivetrain wise, along with engines and everything. The owners of the collection are older, so the bigger clutches aren't the greatest for them. You know, the ones that are really stiff and everything. So we try and give them a comfortable ride.
Okay. So these aren't strictly restorations. You're doing some modifications and customization too.
Yeah, this is a lot of modification and customization. Most of the cars that have been done since my boss has been working for him no longer have any badges to them, except for like a few. When I was doing my internship there, I helped on a 57 Thunderbird. Which wasn't heavily customized on the body, but just enough that it like makes it look 10 times better than an actual 57.
Nice.
The wheel well skirts for the rear, instead of keeping that ugly little line in there, he had removed it, chopped it like 3 inches so you could still get the wheel out, and then just welded it to the car.
Oh, wow.
So it's a permanent skirt that you can still, you know, remove the tire from in case of a flat tire or something.
Nice.
With like,
go ahead. Sorry.
no, it's okay. With like the Bronco that we, or he added on like electronic steps to it, or like an electronic side. I can't even think of what they're called now.
I know what you're talking about, and now I can't think of it either. The like things that go down, so you can step on.
Yeah, the little running boards.
Those things, yeah.
So you put like electronic ones on that for them.
Okay.
So when the door opens, it senses it and they pop right out. And when the door closes, they go back underneath and they
Yeah.
don't like the look of the car at all.
Nice.
So it's nice, like little stuff like that.
Yeah. Do you like one versus the other, doing restoration versus doing customization?
I like customization because you get to play with metal more, I feel.
Here's to that.
I love doing the metal fabrication stuff. It's fun. It's a good challenge every time you go to like try and, either whether it's just, your hammer and dolly straightening something or you're actually fabricating a piece to go on the car. It's always just kind of like a complicated puzzle that you have to figure out, which is fun and frustrating.
I love it. So metal, would you say, is that your favorite of all the things?
Definitely, yeah.
Awesome. Well, good. Come out to Phoenix because we have a lot of metal shaping to do and we could really use you.
I would love to, but if I come out, can I have a kitten?
Yeah, please. Please. We need homes for these kittens. Like, so come out like next week, take a kitten.
If I could afford to get out, I would be out there next week to take a kitten.
Well, we can maybe arrange something. We'll talk offline about that. We're running low on time, so I have to first ask permission to go a few minutes over. Are you okay with that?
Perfectly fine.
Okay, awesome. I read an article about you in Tech Force, their publication on women technicians, and there was a sentence in there that kind of struck me that I would love for you to talk about a little bit. It was like, as soon as you start showing up the guys, they become like worse to you.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that and that perspective shift for you, because I think often it's like, oh, they're being hard on me because I'm not good enough or because I'm a girl. Like, tell me about that.
So that directly correlated to college. When I stepped into the shop the first day, I was a nobody. I had no experience. I was wholehearted with that with everybody. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So if I'm doing something wrong, let me know. I'll fix it.
Yeah.
And within the first semester, the teachers were looking at me and showing my work as, hey, this is what you want to do. Which was kind of crazy to me because I was like, well, this kind of happened fast. And it wasn't a lot of the guys. A lot of the guys were very supportive of having me there. It was one guy in particular, who just thought that he should be the one who's getting all the recognition and everything. And not to say I was getting all of it, but a majority. And so he was like, just, kept trying to put me down and kept trying to tell me, you're not going to make it. You're not going to be able to do this. Like, why would you want to do this? This is man's work and stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I'm happy here. You're not. Maybe you shouldn't be doing this. But like,
I love the confidence.
his dad worked heavily in restoration on the auction side. And I'm not going to name names because I don't want to be that person. But, he was supposedly, according to his son, a very big hotshot. And I think he let that get to his head. And when he saw somebody who had no experience whatsoever getting more recognition for the work that was being done, he got jealous and took the jealousy out on me and nobody else really. So he was just kind of like I don't know if you want to call it an inferiority complex or a superiority complex or what, but like he had some sort of complex going on that was affecting the way he was looking at me and like me in the shop in general.
Yeah. I say that again for the people in the back, like where this stuff comes from jealousy, right? Like,
and it took me forever to realize that too. I dealt with it in the firehouse. The water rescue I didn't because it was mainly older guys. There weren't any kids my age. But firehouse, there was like 8 kids that were in my senior class that I was, with them, and they didn't like me and hated when I was doing well and, gave me even more crap when I wasn't doing well. And it took me probably about 2 or 3 years of, working with guys constantly to realize, oh, you're just jealous and being petty. You're just thinking you're, having some sort of one up on me just because of how you were born and not like what's actually in, your brain and your skills and, your muscle memory of doing everything and that kind of stuff. So.
I love it. All right. So with all of your experiences thus far, I mean, to be as young as you are and have the experiences that you have and how eloquent and well-spoken you are on all of this, you are wise beyond your years. I'm like beyond excited to see where your career is going to take you. I guess one more question before I get to this final question is, what do you want? Like, what's the next thing that you want to accomplish? Like, or thing that you would love to do?
I would love to finish a car start to finish, most part on my own, knowing that it was me doing, everything from the metalwork to the 80 grit to the 180 to the primer to the 400 out to the, 6 or 800, depending on what paint you're putting on or whatever,
Yeah.
to say, okay, I did this car on the body from literal point B or from point A to point B. It went from start to finish, and I had a hand in every single part of it. I haven't been at a shop long enough to experience that.
That's fair.
I'm getting close. I started working on that 59 Corvette my first week, and for 6 months I did fiberglass filler and body filler work for 6 months straight. No break. I got tortured when I went back. Very tortured. But once I saw it in primer, I was like, this is awesome, because I looked down the side and I'm like, this is pin straight. Like, I am so proud of this. I can't wait to see it in paint. Now, I haven't been allowed to do any of the higher grits once it's been in primer, but he's got to check my work, so that's fine.
You'll get there.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
I got plenty of time to get there.
I love it. Do you have a dream car that you'd love to restore?
There's so many.
Fair enough. I'm in the same boat as you.
Eventually, I would like to restore a Studebaker with my dad. That's his favorite. He's like torn between Studebaker and Packard as being his favorite.
Nice.
Although he has Cadillacs because, couldn't afford those. Or ideally, like, I know the one car I really want to do that's going to be a customized car is one of my dad's. He's got an 80 Cadillac diesel Seville. But the 80 Sevilles have a horrible looking rear end. I don't like the way they look, so I want to turn it into a wagon. He has already told me he's going to sell it to me, so I can say this in public that, I'm going to turn it into a wagon.
I love it. That's going to be awesome. Very cool.
Then we also have, in my family, we have a 55 Cadillac Fleetwood that has been in the family since 1962.
Oh, wow.
And last restoration was in the 80s when my dad did it. So I would like eventually, once that car gets passed to me, because I know my brother won't put the love into it, I would like to be able to restore that fully and put it on a rotisserie and give it the TLC it deserves, because I've been underneath it. It needs it.
Fair enough. Those are all awesome projects. I love it. All right. So, final question. You have the opportunity to speak to the younger you, or the equivalent of you out there in the world, some young girl who wants to do what you're doing now. What are your words of advice to her?
Don't give up. Don't let the little voice in your head stop you. Because when those jealous guys make those comments, that voice does try to stop you. And you can't listen to it. You have to power through it every day and say, hey, like, this is what you want to do. This is what you need to work to do. Keep doing it. Keep your head down. Keep going. Or as Dory says, just keep swimming.
Fair enough. Any tips on how to do that? Right? It's easy to say it.
It is.
But how to do that? What were some of your coping skills or ways of having yourself back into it?
Having a support system, definitely. I had probably 2 or 3 guys that were in my college classes that, like, if I was having a rough day, I could just say to them, hey, can I vent? And also like my boyfriend's been great. I'd go home to our apartment and I'd just look at him and be like, I had a horrible day. I need to scream about it. And he'd be like, okay, scream. Do what you gotta do. I'm here. You want to hit something? Like, here's a pillow. Like, you know, get the emotions out, and go and do it tomorrow. Like, you know what you did wrong or you know what you need to do better and go ahead and do it. And if it's the people saying something, then, find the appropriate person. If you can't handle it yourself, find the appropriate person to talk to about it who can do something about, people and their negative mouths.
I love it. Perfect. Wonderful, wonderful advice to end on. I so appreciate you joining me. You're fantastic. I'm so excited for where your career is going to take you and to watch as this unfolds for you. And I'm going to hold you to that taking a kitten thing. We're gonna work on that offline.
I gotta convince the boyfriend. I've been trying to convince him for a while for the second one.
I'll send you pictures. It'll convince him.
Every time you on your story, they'll go, babe, look, can I have one? I'll give you a ticket to get there.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me. We're 100% out of time here, so I'm going to let you go enjoy the rest of your evening. And for everybody who tuned in, thank you guys so much for spending some time with me and hanging out every Wednesday for these incredible women that we get to meet and hear their stories and shine a light on all the wonderful things they are doing. Huge thank you to Drive Time for making these happy hours possible and to continue on. We're getting close to, I think we're getting close to 100 episodes, which is crazy. So this has been going on longer than I expected it to, but it has been absolutely one of the most amazing things. I've just totally enjoyed it. I enjoyed meeting all of you amazing women. I've enjoyed meeting you. Thank you for joining me. Everybody who's watching, make sure you go follow her, go show her some love, cheer her on, watch as her journey unfolds. And for now, I'm going to bid you guys a good night. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to yourselves. Be good to one another. And I will see you next week. Bye.